We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the latest on the Calgary Flames. Things have hit another low and things are really getting messy. Tension is building. Will we see significant changes? Plus, we have the latest trade talk around the Senators, Habs, and St. Louis Blues. We have some other information regarding some injuries, roster updates, and a couple of special players, former NHL players, being honored with their respective teams. All on coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of information to discuss today. Lots, so let's jump right in and get started. First off, when it comes to the NHL waiver wire, we once again have no waiver activity. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that the Edmonton Oilers were rumored and speculated to maybe be putting forward Jesse Puljujarvi on waivers because they had to make room to bring back forward Kailer Yamamoto, who was returning after being on long-term injury reserve. He had been ready and was expected to play for tonight's game. The Oilers had made mention through their head coach, Shea yesterday in his press conference that there was going to be moves coming to make the space for Yamamoto to return, but with nobody being on waivers and no trade announced, people were wondering what it would be. We now finally know the answer to that, as they've taken youngsters Dylan Holloway and Vincent Desharnais and demoted them to the American Hockey League. So sending those two players down will make the space necessary for Yamamoto to come in. It will change things up, though. Woodcroft's been running an 11-7 setup with 11 forwards and 7D. They'll have to go 12-6 now, obviously not having Desharnais available to them. He's actually been a nice, pleasant surprise as another young defenseman, having a good positive impact on the club in a variety of ways, including the penalty kill. So they're certainly going to have to make some adjustments. This may not be for very long. It depends on what we see here in activity, if a Puljujarvi trade takes place or something else. I'm sure Ken Holland and the Oilers are reluctant to put Puljujarvi on waivers because they know that there's probably a good chance he'll get claimed. He's on an expiring deal, $3 million. I'm sure a team that's especially out of the playoffs might decide to take a flyer on him, pick him up as a project, and see if they can't make something work to consider signing him for the future. He's still a restricted free agent as well in this offseason. So I'll be interested to see where things go. But now we know what the Oilers moves are doing, and there's still no news on Puljujarvi and his future there with Edmonton. Of course, the Carolina Hurricanes have inducted former goaltender Cam Ward into their Hurricanes Hall of Fame, so that's certainly a well-deserved honor. Ward had a great career, of course, leading them to a Stanley Cup as a youngster when he was first into the NHL, taking over in the playoffs for Martin Gerber and leading them all the way to the Stanley Cup was quite a run. Something that was historical in a sense, but we've seen a lot of goalies do that in the past as well. It's been a little while since it's happened, but Jordan Binnington's probably the most recent example in St. Louis. Patrick Waugh did the same thing back in the 80s with Montreal, and Ward is in that same kind of category. Matt Murray with Pittsburgh when he first came up as well. Not even expected to play. You take over from the veteran and, go on a run. It's happened. He's had a good run there in Carolina. Long-time goalie. It was nice to see him honored. Big night tonight in Ottawa as well, as they're honoring and retiring the number 25 for Chris Neil. Chris Neil, longtime NHL veteran, played over 1,000 games for the Senators, and I know some were skeptical, or I guess, not really understanding why the Senators would do this. Chris Neil certainly was not a big offensive star, wasn't an all-star, but he had a significant impact on the franchise as well as the community. Still part of the franchise today. He's done a lot of work and a variety of things with the team since he retired, especially in the form of charity and different things as well. He had a major impact and did a lot of hard work with the Senators, and I can certainly understand why they would decide to honor and retire his number. So 25 goes to the Raptors tonight at the Canadian Tire Center as the Senators wait to do battle with the Chicago Blackhawks. It'll also be the first time that we've seen Alex DeBrincat play his former team since being traded to the Senators. So it'll be obviously not in Chicago, so there won't be a tribute video or anything like that, but be interesting for that storyline to play out here as well. A few other updates from around the league and some injuries of roster moves. The New York Islanders have returned Otto Koivula back to the American Hockey League. It seems like Jean-Gabriel Pageau is ready to make his return, so that'll create a roster spot for him. We've also seen that the Canucks and the goalie Thatcher Demko, who seems like he's been out forever now, was reportedly close to a return, and now from word is that when everything that happened in practice this morning, that it looks like he's encountered a setback. He left practice early. It looked like he tweaked something. So I mean, that was not supposed to be anywhere near. I think it's been like 9 or 10 weeks or something crazy. He's been out now. It was only supposed to be, I think, 2 or 3 weeks when it was originally announced. Now, here we are, and it could be longer again. There's been a lot of speculation about Demko. He was a player that there was some talk back, I want to say probably at least 2 or 3 weeks ago now, that there were some NHL reporters indicating that they had heard that Demko, amongst all the things going on in Vancouver and all the chaos and trades that are probably coming, lack of success, all that he may not even want to stay, and that he may want out. They didn't say he had asked for a trade or anything of that nature. They haven't gotten to that point, but sometimes you hear that players are not happy. They would welcome a trade, even though they haven't gone to management and actually asked for it. He hasn't since done some interviews and has denied that's the case, and says he's quite happy to stay in Vancouver. So we'll see where things go at this point. The bigger concern is certainly his health, and to get him back to playing and see if he can return to the old Thatcher Demko that was quite good there for the Canucks for a period of time. The New Jersey Devils have also demoted forward Alexander Holtz to the American Hockey League. Seen an online speculation from Devils fans that maybe a trade was coming because they've been heavily linked to Sharks power forward Timo Meier. We know that the Devils do covet Meier and probably are going to, probably stand one of the best chances to land him from what we've heard. They do have a lot of young prospects, players, and draft currency that could certainly be used as trade bait that would interest the Sharks. At this point, no deal has been reached. One of the areas of concern for the Devils to do this is the $10 million qualifying offer, which I think any team is going to be a little reluctant on when acquiring this player. If you're acquiring him and you know there's a chance he could be a rental and you get him for that price that you're happy with, then you probably don't care too much. But I don't think there's too many teams that would be in that boat. There might be a couple. There has been other teams like the Leafs, for example, that have been linked to this player. I don't know that Toronto could pull that off or that it really makes the most sense. I think they're probably going to go a different direction, but the Devils have been the team kind of, the most linked to this player. There's been some reports that he would, of all the teams mentioned, that he himself would prefer to go to New Jersey. Of course, fellow countryman and good friend Nico Hischier, captain and top center, or one of the top centers, he and Jack Hughes, for the Devils on that team. So I think he'd be happy to go there if he's going to leave San Jose. We'll have to see. But the Alexander Holtz demotion today from Devils reporters are indicating that it is not indicative of a subsequent move. So don't expect anything, at least not we know of here as of yet. Now, on to a variety of different trade scenarios and other things here, including the Calgary Flames. The Flames had another not-so-good game last night, lost again. More comments from Daryl Sutter that this seems to be, really wearing on the team. Sutter, we know he's really blunt, comes off quite grumpy at times. Sometimes he can be entertaining to listen to, and other times it's just a little cringy because, the players are probably not thrilled with some of the things that he's been saying. And we've seen Alan Walsh, who's one of the more prominent NHL agents who represents Jonathan Huberdeau. Of course, Alan Walsh, for those of you who are overly familiar with all the top agents in the league, was most well known recently for having that picture of Marc-Andre Fleury with a sword going through him from the Vegas Golden Knights when all the rumors were going around him about being traded away from Vegas. Of course, he's not afraid to speak his mind. He's not afraid to cause a stir. And he put out a tweet here, which I'll show you, basically that says that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And he also says that negativity sucks the joy right out of the players. And that, to me, sounds like a direct shot at head coach Daryl Sutter. But I think Sutter, it's fair to say that he does come off that way in a lot of ways. And I do think that it's also fair to say that the style of coaching that he brings can not be for everyone. And it seems like, of course, I'm not in the room. I haven't talked to players personally, so this is just my take on it from what I've seen myself and from what I hear others talking about online, is that it sure sounds like his style is wearing on that team and that it's kind of building to the point that we might see changes. Clearly, if Alan Walsh is putting out this kind of information, that goes to show you 100% that Jonathan Huberdeau can't be happy. They would be talking. We already heard rumblings about a potential Mackenzie Weegar trade, and that teams were inquiring on Weegar, including the Ottawa Senators, which I know has been kind of, downplayed here a little bit. I don't think the Flames are going to rush and trade Weegar or Huberdeau just yet. They've only had them on their roster, not even a full season. Of course, they acquired them both in that blockbuster trade last offseason, got them signed both long-term. But you can make an argument that players are not fitting in the greatest. Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar are both on pace, offensively at least, to have one of their worst seasons of their careers. Drastically down. Like, Huberdeau's on pace for about 55 points, and he's typically been an 80, 90-point player. I mean, that is drastically down. Rhett Warner, former NHL player who I'm sure has some connections and does a podcast in Calgary called the Burner Podcast, he recently made comments saying that Huberdeau wasn't happy, and the main reason he signed was, more than anything, is just he just couldn't turn down the money. I mean, the money that the Flames and Trey Living offered him was, pretty substantial, and he wasn't confident he even might not get that elsewhere. Especially considering he'd have to play another season, a full season in Calgary before becoming a UFA. I think players understand that going to a new team right off the bat, that you may not have the success right away. It takes time to gel in with your new teammates. Look around the league, and a lot of players that change teams. You do see some that click immediately and they just take right off and have tons of success. And there's some that it just takes time to gel. And it can be a tough transition, and not all great players can play great together. It's just that simple. Not everybody's going to have that chemistry. But now you got to wonder about the future of Huberdeau in Calgary, the future of Daryl Sutter as the head coach. I mean, we already heard the Weegar stuff. We've heard other trades that have been speculated. I know Friedman and Merrick were talking on 32 Thoughts, and Jeff Merrick show saying that maybe Calgary's going to, maybe it's not the greatest time for them to be really pushing trades right now. Maybe they need to look at stuff internally first. And if they're not going to be in the playoffs, there's no point in being buyers. So they've been linked to Josh Anderson, they've been linked to Brock Besser, they've been linked to Luke Shen, but does it make sense for them to go and add if this team is really not capable of, A, for sure making the playoffs, and B, if they do make it, are they going to win anything? You don't want to waste your assets, but at the same time, you want to give your team belief that you believe in them and give them every little bit of help they can get to be successful. So it's a tough balance for a lot of NHL general managers, I'm sure, but you got to think if changes are coming. Huberdeau appears to be unhappy, which is not shocking considering how the season has gone. I know Sutter's made a lot of remarks this year that have ticked people off, and it's just a matter of seeing what's next. So what do you think is the next move in Calgary? Are we going to see Sutter replaced? I mean, he's got a longer contract right now than the GM. GM Brad Treliving, according to reporters, does not have a contract beyond the current season. He's in the final year. He's a lame duck GM. But last offseason, he did extend Sutter. So Sutter has more term in his contract than he does. And of course, he signed Weegar and Huberdeau to these massive max term extensions. And now neither player really seems to be the best fit for that group. So I don't know if a coaching change is what they're going to try first or what happens. But something's got to give there. People are unhappy in Calgary. Lots of negativity, lots of frustration. And this team has been stuck in mediocrity for, seems like, 20 plus years. And it's time, as there's something you think they're going to get out of it, something happens. And this is the latest. So be curious to see how they respond and what comes next. The latest, we're on the Montreal Canadiens. Lots of reports indicating that Joel Edmondson and Sean Monahan are probably the two of the players that have the most value, the most interest from around the league. But at the same time, teams are the most skeptical about possibly acquiring the players due to the injuries they've encountered this year. Monahan had a hot start, was off to a real good start, playing well for the first time in a long time. Then he got hurt, and he's been out way longer than expected. Edmondson's been dealing with a back issue, off and on for quite some time now as well. So even though there's a lot of interest, there's also a lot of skepticism around that. So I don't know the odds of them being traded. It certainly is less now than it was before. But if they can both return here shortly and get some playing time in before the deadline and show that they look good, then maybe things will change a bit. But you got to think that either their value is going to go way down if they are moved, or they won't be moved because there's not enough interest because of being concerned over the injuries. Evgeny Dadonov, Jonathan Drouin, certainly players that have been better lately, might be creating a bit of a market for themselves. And Pierre LeBrun on TSN's Insider Trading yesterday said that basically teams that are trying for the higher profile players but aren't successful will likely circle back to the Habs to consider one of these guys as a cheaper option. The ones that don't get your Timo Myers or Patrick Kanes or any of those top names, if they're, once they know their futures, if they're out on those players, then they might have to circle back to something cheaper just to add some depth. So we'll see what happens, but things, Montreal's not looking at the deadline like they were last year when they get some massive returns on some players. So this year, they'd like to shed some contracts, they'd like to get some stuff back, but they just don't have the same quality and same value like they did this time last year. The Ottawa Senators have some updates. Pierre Dorion spoke to the media yesterday, confirming a few things. One, he confirmed 100% that Alex DeBrincat, even though he's been mentioned in the rumor mill, is not going to be traded. The full intent is to sign him. I think the only reason they haven't really gotten further negotiations is because of the pending sale of the team. I think they want to wait for new ownership to come in before they get any more, big money, long-term contracts on the books. They did confirm that a few other players, including Derek Brassard and Travis Hamonic, are very unlikely to be traded as well. Dorian mentioned how Hamonic's been a good leader for them and a good influence on Jake Sanderson off and on the ice, in that he's unlikely to be dealt, and that Derek Brassard, who's closing in on 1,000 career games, will indeed play that with the Ottawa Senators, and barring something substantial, somebody offering him something crazy that he just can't refuse, that those guys would not be dealt. But you're likely going to see players like Austin Watson, Tyler Mott, Nick Holden, if there's interest in those guys, which I suspect one or two of them probably will have interest. They're the more likely guys to be moved. Cam Talbot apparently also getting some interest, but of course we're waiting for him to come back. He was at practice today, which is a good sign. He won't play tonight, of course. Mansogar will continue to go in net, and Mandolese will be the backup. Probably looking at a couple more games, but sometime within the next week, Talbot hopefully will be returning. And if he can play well, he's reportedly getting some interest from the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, they recently lost Logan Thompson to injury. Right now, they do have the option of having an experienced backup goalie to call up, and Laurent Brossoit, who was with the team in the AHL. So they do have Hill and Brossoit. They'll have a few games to kind of analyze that tandem and see what they think. Otherwise, if they want to consider, picking up another experienced veteran like Talbot to help out. So we'll see. I don't expect Ottawa to be overly busy. Pierre Dorion said that he doesn't know if they're going to be buyers or sellers yet. Depends on how the next 6-7 games go. And I do agree with that to some extent. But to me, it only makes sense to be buyers if they're going to get a player with term who can help for not just the rest of this year, but for the next few years at least. It doesn't make sense for them to get any rental players. So I don't really think you're going to see them as being buyers, at least not in your traditional sense. If there's a hockey trade to be made that helps the team long term, we'll see it. Otherwise, I see them most likely just selling off a few veteran players. They generate some interest if it's there. And otherwise, that's about it. They'll move forward, stand pat for next year, move forward. The St. Louis Blues are also rumored to possibly be trading a defenseman, but it does certainly seem like a complicated task. Darren Dreger talked about this from TSN on Insider Trading yesterday as well, saying that the top 4 defensemen all have a form of a no-trade clause, so it's going to be complicated. But there have been a lot of teams apparently sniffing around and kind of kicking tires a little bit on Colton Parayko. Now, Parayko has a long-term, big-money contract. Hasn't played the greatest, really. Seeing Blues fans be frustrated with him a lot this season. So I'm not sure how much interest there really is, but, at the same time, there reportedly is some. Of course, you have Torrey Krug, Nick Leddy, Justin Falk, all have some degree of interest around them as well, because they're all players that would come with term. None of them are expiring deals. So it certainly makes sense that if a team really wants to acquire a top 4 defenseman that has term and that they, for the right price on a hockey trade, then it certainly makes sense that they could be, on the market. But they all have a form of a no trade. But St. Louis is going to be an interesting team to watch here. We don't know what Doug Armstrong is going to do. It's obviously Ryan O'Reilly's out there. Barbashev is out there. Some of these D are being, tossed around as potential trade bait players. So we'll have to see how this team reshapes itself and what moves Doug Armstrong makes, but wouldn't be shocking if there's at least more rumblings on some interest around these guys. I think an offseason move on the defense core is more likely, given the fact that they have a lot more control, and we're talking about more money here, especially on the Parayko contract. That's a lot of money, a lot of term, and as much as I can see there being some interest, just not sure we're going to see that take place, but we'll see where it goes. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.